Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are embarking on a phenomenal journey. We're going to trace the epic 50 million year saga of the very first inhabitants of the Indian subcontinent. We're going way, way back, far before any written records even existed, to uncover a story of survival, ingenuity, and evolution that shaped the land as we know it today. And ultimately, it's the story that led to you.
So, let's dive right into our core question. Think about this. Before the highly organized Harappans, before the Vedic sages, who exactly were the unknown, ancient ancestors that first conquered this wild land? And more importantly, did their relentless will to survive eventually give rise to our greatest ancient civilizations?
All right, let's start with Section 1, the birth of the Indian subcontinent.
To really understand our origins, we have to go back to a time when India wasn't even attached to Asia. It was actually just a lonely island floating in the middle of a vast ocean. We kicked things off about 50 million years ago with a violently massive tectonic collision. The Indian plate crashed into the Eurasian plate with such unimaginable force that it literally buckled the earth, swallowing the sea between them and giving birth to the mighty Himalayas.
Picture this. Before that crash, India was essentially a barren, rocky expanse. But the sudden rise of the colossal Himalayas blocked passing winds. That single geographical event brought the very first monsoons to the region. The melting snows birthed mighty rivers like the Ganga and Narmada, completely transforming the dry rock into a lush, water-rich paradise that was perfectly staged to host life.
Which brings us to Section 2, the first human inhabitants.
Now, when the first wandering hominids finally made the trek from Africa to this newly formed paradise, they didn't exactly walk into a welcoming garden. It was a terrifying place. They had to share the jungle with the stegodon, a colossal ancestor of the elephant sporting 10-foot-long tusks. And lurking in the rivers, the hexaprotodon. We're talking about a literal truck-sized, hippo-like monster with rock-crushing jaws. It was a brutal, unforgiving world where every single bush hid potential death. Only the absolute strongest could survive here.
Yet, against all odds, they did survive. And we have the breathtaking archaeological evidence to prove it. We've actually found 1.5 million year old sharp stone tools in Atirampakam near Chennai. And back in 1982, the skull of the incredibly athletic Narmada man, a Homo erectus, was unearthed in Madhya Pradesh. With slightly smaller brains but incredibly powerful bodies, these early humans successfully hunted those giant beasts using nothing more than heavy, pear-shaped stone hand axes. Talk about human resilience, right? They were the undisputed kings of the jungle for thousands of years.
But then things changed. Section 3, the volcanic winter extinction.
Their reign just wasn't meant to last forever. They conquered the beasts, sure, but they couldn't conquer the Earth itself. A ticking time bomb went off on an Indonesian island thousands of miles away, the colossal Toba supervolcano eruption. The explosion was so massive it plunged India into a deadly volcanic winter. The ash literally blocked out the sun, turning day into night. Life-giving rivers turned into toxic, sludgy poison, and the lush, warm jungles rapidly froze and died off.
So, why didn't Homo erectus survive this massive shift? Well, the very traits that made them so dominant suddenly became their three fatal flaws. Number one, their large, muscular bodies were like gas-guzzling engines. They required massive amounts of food that simply didn't exist anymore. Number two, their heavy hand axes were completely useless against the smaller, faster animals that managed to survive the freeze. And number three, they lacked the advanced cognitive ability to anticipate tomorrow, meaning they couldn't plan ahead or store food. Tragically, the first kings of India went extinct in the cold and the dark.
Moving on to Section 4, Arrival of Homo sapiens.
From the ashes of that awful extinction, a new protagonist emerges, Homo sapiens, us. But our ancestors weren't conquerors arriving in triumph. They were refugees fleeing a drying Africa. Facing the heartbreaking reality of starving families, they made a desperate gamble. They fled on makeshift rafts across the perilous Red Sea. They couldn't survive the deep deserts of Arabia, so they stuck to the beaches in a multi-generational coastal migration, living almost entirely off seafood. Finally, roughly 65,000 years ago, their descendants arrived in an India that had finally recovered its lush, green splendor.
But getting here was just half the battle. They faced a massive, immediate problem. See, Africa was full of open plains where you could spot predators from a mile away. India's dense jungles, on the other hand, were a terrifying, mysterious maze full of tigers and elephants. For these exhausted travelers, sleeping under the open sky meant certain death. They had to find a solution to survive their very first night.
And thankfully, nature provided. They found sanctuary in the natural rock fortresses of the Bhimbetka caves in central India. But a cave is really just a dark hole without a defense, right? So they harnessed fire. Fire became their first security guard, keeping those apex predators far away. But what's really beautiful is that it also became their first social media. Around the warmth of the fire, tribes bonded, shared food, and passed down stories. It was literally the birthplace of human community.
Next up, Section 5. The Early Technological Revolution.
This newly formed community soon faced its own intense trials. As the climate shifted yet again, the giant, slow animals vanished, replaced by lightning-fast deer, darting rabbits, and birds. Facing starvation once more, human ingenuity kicked into high gear. That old hand axe was heavy and clumsy. You certainly couldn't throw it at a bird. So our ancestors invented microliths. These were inch-long, razor-sharp stone blades that they attached to wood and bone. This was literally ancient missile technology, the very first spears and arrows. They proved they could beat their hunger with brain power instead of just raw muscle.
And they were incredibly resourceful. Just imagine this. Archaeologists have found 25,000-year-old giant ostrich eggshells right in ancient Maharashtra. Yes, you heard that right, ostriches in India. A single egg equaled 24 chicken eggs, easily feeding whole families. And true to their clever nature, they reused those ultra-durable shells as water balls. Meanwhile, the structure of society was rapidly evolving. Women were meticulously decoding nature's supermarket, figuring out which sweet roots and wild rice were safe and edible, quietly laying the massive foundation for future agriculture. The tribe also engaged in high-risk, high-reward tasks, like scaling deadly cliffs to gather pure energy in the form of honey, cleverly using smoke to pacify the bees. And all of this functioned on an economy built entirely on a strict code of sharing. If you hunted successfully today, you shared, because tomorrow you might return empty-handed. Trust was their true currency. It was humanity's very first social safety net.
But they weren't just surviving day to day. They were thinking, demonstrating a deepening human consciousness. They started questioning their existence. They created the very first art on the walls of Bhimbetka, likely as a kind of hunting magic, hoping that capturing an animal's image on the wall would basically guarantee a successful hunt tomorrow. Even more profoundly, at sites like Sarai Nahar Rai, they began burying their dead with tools, jewelry, and food. This hints at an incredible cognitive leap, the profound realization of a soul and an afterlife.
Which leads us to our final chapter, Section 6, Dawn of Advanced Civilization.
Over millennia, the quiet observations made by those early gatherers culminated in the radical discovery of agriculture. This single massive innovation turned wandering hunters into permanent settlers, sparking a monumental explosion of advanced society. Fast forward a few thousand years to about 5,000 years ago, and the descendants of those early humans built the Indus Valley Civilization, arguably the world's first smart cities. Their urban planning is honestly mind-blowing. Their streets were cut at exact 90-degree right angles. Every single brick used across the massive empire had an exact 4:1 ratio. And their house doors? They opened to back alleys rather than main streets, specifically to ensure privacy and keep dust out of the home.
Their engineering was utterly breathtaking. Really think about this for a second. We are talking about 5,000 years ago, and they had private bathrooms in every single house. They built covered, paved drainage systems featuring accessible manholes for easy cleaning, and of course, the crown jewel, the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro, brilliantly waterproofed with natural bitumen. They basically mastered urban water management long before the modern era.
But the story doesn't just end in the peaceful trading cities of the Indus Valley. Recent, absolutely stunning excavations by the ASI at Sonali on the Ganges Plain have completely rewritten our understanding of ancient Indian warfare. Archaeologists unearthed royal, two-wheeled chariots covered in copper, proving indigenous chariot use, right alongside 8 massive, incredibly sharp copper antenna swords.
All of this leaves us with a massive, fascinating question to ponder. These shocking discoveries of ancient, royal chariots and lethal copper swords perfectly echo the epic, devastating battles described in the Mahabharata. It leaves us with a truly provocative thought. Is this great epic all just a myth, or is the true hidden history of our ancestors finally coming to light from beneath the earth? It's an incredible question, and one that absolutely guarantees our journey to understand the early humans of India is far from over.